Today we're going to hear about intentional Eucharistic communities from Dr. William D'Antonio. He received his Bachelor of Arts degrees in 1948 from Yale University, his MA 1953 from University of Wisconsin, and his PhD in 1958 from Michigan State University. Right now he's a professor emeritus at the University of Connecticut, and he's a fellow at the Institute for Policy Research and Catholic Studies at the Catholic University of America. He's the author, co-author, or editor of 14 books and monographs and many papers in the areas of family and religion, authority and decision-making, small groups within large organizations, and the religious affiliation of members of the U.S. Congress, and exploring the political implications thereof. Professor D'Antonio, would you please explain what is an intentional Eucharistic community?
Yes, happy to do so. The three words really mean what they imply. It's intentional in the sense that the people involved organize it on their own behalf and are responsible for it in every part of the community's activities. It's Eucharistic in the sense that the central act of worship around which the communities live and have their being is the Eucharist. And it's a community to the extent to which it extends well beyond just meeting for Eucharist once a week or, in some cases, once or twice a month. Most intentional Eucharistic communities meet weekly, although not always on the weekend. So it's a community to the extent to which the members are committed to trying to live the gospel beyond the end of the liturgy, so that when they say, go forth and live the gospel, they mean it. And in many ways, they are communities dedicated to peace and justice issues, and their members are either supportive of or very active in those activities.
Are there many of them in the U.S.? Are they spread across the country or clustered in certain regions?
There are. When we did our first study in the late 1990s as part of a larger study of small Christian communities in the U.S., we were able to identify about 80 of them. We now are able to identify about 150 of them. And we think that that also is an undercount because many communities just prefer to do what they're doing without making themselves public. And so at least 150 seems a very conservative number right now. Where are they located? Along the East Coast from Massachusetts to Washington, D.C. In the Washington, D.C. area alone, we have 8. Massachusetts has at least as many. New Jersey seems to also abound with them. And you find them growing rapidly on the West Coast, in California especially, but also in Oregon, Colorado. There are 5 or 6 right now. So they're spreading. Chicago is another area around which they can be found. There are not as many in the South. But, yes.
How long have they been around, and how did they get started, and why did they get started?
Well, the why is, of course, in part answered by Vatican II. Many of these are the outgrowth of Vatican II, laity who took seriously the council activities of Vatican II, that the laity had a new and important role to play in the Church. For a while, the hierarchy even allowed the experimentation, encouraged the experimentation of home masses, and so many of those grew out of Vatican II. Many of those also grew out of the what you might call the counter-revolution against Vatican II. People who were in parishes that were trying to live the teachings of Vatican II. Along came a new pastor who squashed everything and closed it down. And out of that kind of return to pre-Vatican II activity came members of the parishes who then formed themselves into these intentional communities. Some of whom have made charters with the local bishop, majority of whom are simply active either with or without the antagonism of the local hierarchy. So they're quite diverse in type and spreading because they reflect desire on the part of a growing number of laity to have a Eucharistic celebration that reflects to them the teachings of Vatican II. And in that sense, of course, they seem to be returning to what you might call the early church, the church of the first century, about which Schillebeeckx, the great Dutch theologian, has written much.
Is the movement still expanding, and what do you see for the future?
Well, it sure is expanding. What is an important characteristic of these intentional communities is the people who are joining them. They are by far the most educated Catholics in the country. In that sense, they look very much like what you would call the people who have been active in Voice of the Faithful, the people who have been active in the Call to Action. They're highly educated. What is perhaps not surprising is their education includes a high level of education in Catholic parochial high schools and Catholic colleges. An extraordinary, almost half of them have graduate degrees well beyond the bachelor's degree. Their income levels are higher. They are the people whom you would find otherwise as the lectors and the Eucharistic ministers in the church who have found it necessary to find a more participative way of being church. In that sense, they're generally small. We have them in our rosters as being as small as 15 or 20 members, but as large as 200. When you take into account that the average size of congregations in the U.S. is actually less than 100, taking into account all the Protestant churches, the intentional Eucharistic communities fall right within that grouping. They are small, they're highly dedicated. It takes a lot of responsibility on them to continue their Sunday activities rather than leaving everything to the local parish priest.
If someone wished to join one intentional Eucharistic community, how would one go about finding one in any given locality?
We have several ways of doing that. The easiest way to do that is to go onto the web and find the website for intentional Eucharistic communities. And the website is simply the title, intentionalyeucharisticcommunities.org. Intentional Eucharistic Communities as one continuous word, .org. And up will come our website, which has a considerable amount of information about the May 2009 gathering of communities. There were about 45 communities that came to Washington, D.C. area in May of 2009. And there you will also find articles about the intentional Eucharistic community movement. The NCR has written articles in 2001, and again a feature article by Tom Roberts, who was present at the recent gathering. You'll find that information, and you'll find the list of communities that have indicated a willingness to be listed. So of the 150 that we have, some 50 or 60, maybe 80, are found on the website right now.
Now, if there were no such community in someone's area, how would one go about organizing an intentional Eucharistic community? Is it always necessary to locate a priest who would officiate at the Eucharist celebrations?
Let me tackle the last question first. Is it necessary to have a priest? It's quite clear that there is variety in the way in which members of these intentional communities celebrate. In some cases, they have found retired priests who are available. In many cases, they find priests who are attached to, say, colleges and universities like Jesuits or Franciscans, where the priests do not have regular assigned parishes in which they will be working on a Sunday or a weekend. So those priests are available. In some cases, I'm sure they are calling on married priests to help with Sunday liturgies. And I think if you look closely at the list on the website, you'll see that there are some that list women, Roman Catholic women priests. So the listing is diverse. It's growing. And what would you do if you wanted to begin one in an area where there isn't one? There are a number of members of the community, of the larger community, who are willing to volunteer. There is information about how people have organized themselves, and there are one or two people who would make themselves available if people were interested in learning more about this. So the website is a key to the information that people would want if they were interested in organizing an intentional community in their own area.